On this edition of The Nerd Is In, let me show you how to install a Ryzen processor in an AMD Socket AM4. It's easy. Alright, so let's go through the procedure of removing a heatsink and a CPU and reinstalling on an AMD Socket AM4 for the Ryzen processors. First thing I'm going to do is get my static strap and clip it to the metal of the computer case. Second thing I'm going to do, making sure the computer is turned off, I am going to unplug it. You always want to work with the computer turned off. And now we need to get the heatsink, which has just simply got 4 Phillips head screws, which you can probably not even see in this shot. But I'm going to go ahead and get these screws. These are captive screws. They bottom out definitely when you get to the end of the run, and you can definitely hear them click free once you have got them unscrewed all the way. So I'm just running through these 4 screws right here so I can remove the heatsink. Now I've got all 4 of these free. I'm going to twist the heatsink just a little bit to make sure the heatsink compound is not stuck to the heatsink and the CPU, and then I'm going to unplug my fan head. Now you can see my heatsink compound on the bottom. I'm once again going to set this out of the way on the desk, but not face down because I don't want to smear that everywhere. Now we've got the AM4 socket, and all we have is one little handle. One thing I do want to point out to you, though, is right here we have a triangle on the CPU, and we have a corresponding mark on the motherboard. I'm going to pull this lever out and up, make sure I've got it up all the way to loosen up the CPU. Then I can grab the CPU and pull straight up. Now, if I turn it over, this is much more of a traditional CPU with the pins on the CPU and the holes in the socket itself for the AM4. And you can also see probably very likely that there is a triangle in the corner of the socket, but this is a nice motherboard. It is marked right there where the triangle is to put it back in. So to reverse the process, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to make sure my triangle right here lines up with the mark on the motherboard. The other way you can do that is if you notice the 2 missing pins that are close together and the 2 missing pins that are further apart, we can see closer together, further apart on the AM4. I've got it in the right orientation. I want to get it lined up so that it drops into the socket. Make sure it's in all the way. Click the handle down until it locks. Now on this particular motherboard, there is a back plate that goes on the other side of the motherboard that if you're not careful, it will fall out of the back of the motherboard, and then the screws will have nothing to screw into. But right now they're sticking up enough that I should be able to put the heatsink back in, and you can see it's got to go this way to correspond with the screw holes, not this way. Now this time I'm going to reinstall it this way so I can bring my fan head cord around this way as opposed to how it was the other time. So I'm going to very carefully take a look here and get my screws lined up properly with the screw holes on the motherboard. And then we're going to go with that old auto mechanics adage, start them all before you tighten any. So I'm going to get each one of these screws started. I'm going to give this one about 2 turns. Then I'm going to push down on the heatsink and come across to the other side and make sure I got this one started. And it is. And now while I'm over here, I'm going to get this screw started and then come to the 4th screw. I'm kind of just using a lug nut pattern. Now that I've got them all started, I can turn them until they bottom out. That screw's definitely bottomed out. That screw is bottomed out. Number 3 is all the way down. And number 4 is all the way down. So you can definitely tell when you bottom them out. They're spring-loaded screws, and they won't go any further. Just get them snug. That's all you got to do. Now I just need to take my CPU fan head and plug it back into the fan head on the motherboard. And I've got that plugged back in. My wires are out of the way. And it's as simple as that. That's how you do an AMD AM4. This is for the various Ryzen CPUs, and I hope this was helpful.